Now, I knew this question would come up. I did not know it would come up this quickly, but here we go. What is your position today on Recode Knoxville? and specifically duplexes being allowed in all residential districts? We'll start with you, Mr. Stair. Okay. The June birthday.
Sure. You know, I've been serving on city council for 8 years, and one of the things we deal with a lot is land use and zoning. So it was very apparent early on that we needed to update our zoning code. A zoning code is essentially a blueprint for how a city develops, and our current code was drafted in the 60s. Is very much about suburban sprawl, and so it wasn't reflective of our values, and we wanted to draft a code that did reflect those things, like walkability, mixed-use housing, different housing options. And I think this code does that by channeling the growth to the corridors and nodes, and therefore protecting the neighborhoods we know and love. In terms of the duplex question, for most zones currently, the current code allows duplexes. There's only one residential zone it doesn't, and that one's not very common. But in R1, R1A, the common zones around the city, duplexes in the current code are allowed, so that there's not a change there. You know, in terms of the process, it's been a long process. When it felt rushed, when there was a call to vote, I was the first to say we need to postpone this. Since we had a 6-hour meeting that night, we had a 9-hour meeting later. We are taking the time to get it right, because what this is in the end is about creating a city that our children and grandchildren want to live in. Thank
you. I am not for Recode, and this is why. As we consider, even with the various meetings, if we did a poll of who understands Recode, not many of us would realize or recognize what is Recode. And then we also have to understand that there is a historical context as we think about comprehensive rezoning and such, and it was called urban renewal. And people who experience urban renewal, you ask them do the poll and ask those persons, how did that turn out? We really have to recognize that there are unique needs in particular districts and respect those needs, because especially when it comes to development, we need everybody involved, everybody engaged, everybody to understand what this is all about, because it needs to come from the bottom up. And that's how real change happens.
Thank you. Mr. Manis.
Yes, it's been a few weeks ago now that I spoke out against Recode. I was not in favor of Recode, and I think I do realize that there are lots of ordinances within the city. When I was there were several ordinances that were very, very dated. And I think originally two years ago, when there was a mention of updating the zoning ordinance, it was an update of the zoning ordinance, and I think that the initial conversation was increasing density in the commercial corridors, and that's a whole lot different than where we are today. And I do agree with Calvin that I think the citizens are really they're really scared of what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know exactly if it will their property will appreciate or depreciate. And I think until we can show them exactly the impact to their property, we cannot move forward with Recode. And that's why I respect the time and energy that the administration and council have put into this, and my hat is off to them for that. But I do think that we need to step back and really say we have to find a different process so everybody will understand the impact of Recode to you personally.
Thank you. Ms. Kincannon.
Thank you. How many of you have ever been renters in your whole life? Pretty much all of us. When you're young, when you're old, sometimes your whole life you're a renter. I think it's really important. 53% of the people in Knoxville are renters, and we have to make sure that we have enough affordable housing for them. Recode can be part of that solution. We also have challenges with sustainability. Recode can be part of a more sustainable Knoxville. I think we need an open and fair and appropriately slow and grassroots process, but I think we need to move forward with Recode because I think it helps our city be more equitable, affordable, and sustainable. And I'm not concluding that on my own. I've attended numerous NAACP meetings where we talked about the importance of zoning and to equity and affordability. And I think Recode back in the 50s and 60s when it was first adopted was a contributing factor to things like urban renewal. And we need to revisit the idea and have our zoning ordinance reflect our modern preferences and values. I personally live in a duplex. It's not so scary. It's going to help us pay for our college education for our daughter, and it works out just fine. It's not for everybody, but I think duplexes shouldn't be banned either. That's part of the missing middle. So I think that we need to move forward with Recode in a fair, transparent manner.
Mr. Burkhart?
First and foremost, no, I'm not for Recode. I believe that Recode has been extremely not put out to people. Like someone had said earlier, that our citizens don't know how it's going to directly affect them. I think that we need to step up because at the end of the day, this is a one-size-fits-all for our city. Knoxville is extremely diverse and inclusive, and I believe that this is going to negatively affect areas like East Knoxville, Northwest Knoxville, and North Knoxville to change the landscape of those communities. I understand that our current coding is for suburban sprawl. We need to step up and grow our city and be more dense, but I think we need to be more careful with how we do that. And I think we need to educate our voters and educate the people of our city this is affecting. And I said earlier about community involvement and listening. I said a few weeks ago on the radio that I actually think this should be a referendum topic, that it should go to a vote. Our citizens should be allowed to voice their opinions on this and a majority be the answer. We can't keep having 9 people and a mayor decide what fits our whole city. And as mayor, that would be my goal, is to listen. And when it comes to Recode, it is one size fits all. We cannot move forward with this, and we have to address the issues that are in this process. And that is a lack of transparency and a lack of educating our communities.
Myself, I'm for Recode, but I feel like right now the process is a little rushed. I believe that they've waited 50 years to do this, and now they've had like 5 revisions in about a year and a half. And what I think that needs to happen is that I think that they need to bring everybody to the table, because Recode, it affects everybody. It's over 73,000 properties that it affects. And then it's like one of the things that a lot of people haven't thought about is depending on how the Recode is done, it can affect home-based businesses. There's a lot of people that's running business out of their home, and depending on how that Recode is done, they'll no longer be able to do that. So I think that what needs to happen is that those people need to be brought to the table along with everybody else, and everybody come sit down, take our time, come up with one solution that best fits the masses and not just for a few people.